Welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast, designed to bring purpose to the broken through the words of our testimonies. Our prayer is to bring forgiveness, healing, and deliverance to others through the power of our testimonies and God's Word. It's time to raise up beautifully broken women who can live in His goodness daily, break generational curses, and live out His purpose for their lives. And I'm your host, Stephanie Bullock. Now let's dig in. For the month of February, we've been talking about love, and we've been talking about God's love and what that looks like for our lives and how we can apply that. Today, you're going to hear from Cortni Boutwell, and you're going to hear her talk about love at first sight, and then what happens when love loses sight of the priority. She's going to talk with you about loving someone through the suffering, even when that someone has caused the pain that you are experiencing. But loving them through that suffering, even when you don't feel like it, because that's what God has commanded us to do. So I hope that you are encouraged by this story of unconditional, unfailing, and persevering love. Thank you so much for joining us today on Beautifully Broken. I'm so excited to have you. I knew that when I met you, that you were a special soul, just a sweet, sweet soul. And, it wasn't until I learned your story that I kind of understood the pain of where that humbleness and that sweetness came from. And so I appreciate you taking the time to share with us. So, to get started, why don't you tell everybody who you are and a little bit about you and your family, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. Well, thank you for all those kind words. I appreciate that. My name's Cortni Boutwell. I live in Brandon with my husband, Gray, and our 3 boys, 14, 9, and 7.
Boy moms. Woohoo!
Boy moms all the way. And yeah, what else did you ask me?
Well, so what is life like right now? You've got 3 boys and they're in the prime ages. So what's a day in the life of Cortni?
It's a little crazy. Honestly, I was a stay-at-home mom for 6 years, and I went back to work at the end of 2022, and I maintain that it's a respite. It is what I tell everybody is that it went from being about quantity of time to quality of time.
Yes.
And it made me a better mom, honestly. And so I'm a nurse, and I work in a clinic, and it's definitely like the Lord ordained it, and it is exactly where I need to be. And it is it's a nice reprieve from a very loud, crazy home life that I love, but yes. I enjoy going to work every day.
Right. I tell people all the time that I was a much better mom dropping my kids off at daycare and going to work and then picking them back up. Yes. And that worked very well for us. So that's really great. And I know that sometimes, stay-at-home moms are great, and that's a lot of work. But there are some of us that feel like, okay, but I need something different. I need a different perspective on things throughout the day. And so I think that God made each of us different. There are those that are made and designed to be stay-at-home moms, and they do an amazing job out of it. I have some very great friends that are like that, and even homeschool. Girl, I would kill my kids if I homeschooled them. But then, then God made those of us that need to go to work to be a good mom. Okay. And that's okay. So you mentioned that you and your husband will have been married for how long?
20 years this September.
Woo!
It's crazy. We're both like, how has it been that long? It's been forever, and it's not been that long at all in the same time.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct. Mm-hmm. That's great. Mm-hmm. And so I know that you guys have been through some tough times, as any marriage would. We all have our marriage stories where, life gets tough and things get thrown our way that throw us off track. And so why don't you start with just telling your story, if you want to start with how y'all met and all of those good things, and then just kind of lead into what God has placed on your heart today.
Okay. We actually, we met when my freshman year of college, and it was Gray's freshman year of college too. I had gotten saved young, honestly. I gotten saved when I was 6, and then just throughout my teenage years, I just chose to do all the, the teenage things, and had drifted away in my relationship with the Lord. But freshman year, I went to church with a friend of mine, and it's the church that I go to this day with my husband. It's the church where I met my husband.
Okay.
And so that's how we met. It was actually in his dad's Sunday school class. He taught college. God love him. Taught college class.
Wow.
And we met, and we were friends for several years. Honestly, it was a great youth group in the church, and then we all just hung together and ran together, and it's just some of my most precious memories. And then a few years in, we just started talking, got to be friends, and then it turned into more than that. And I graduated in nursing school in 2004, and then in 2005, we got married.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So fast forward to, I mean, by all accounts, I would say, in a worldly way, we had a good marriage.
Yeah.
And we went to church on Sundays, but just as far as relationship for me personally with the Lord, I was honestly, busy pursuing worldly things, and so in, 2010, I got pregnant with our first son.
Oh, wow. 5 years?
5 years.
Wow.
Yes.
That is unheard of these days.
And that's a little, and that's part of the testimony, is that I actually, and I'll slide this in there.
Sure.
I had an ovarian tumor when I was 6, and they had to go in and remove one of my ovaries. And so it was always said that, when the time comes, I may have trouble getting pregnant.
Wow.
And so, we weren't, there was a point in time where we definitely weren't trying, but we weren't preventing.
Sure.
And that's part of what happened when I got pregnant in 2009, is that was the Lord's timing in allowing me to, become pregnant.
And his timing is perfect.
And it is. Mm-hmm. It is. And so I was 5 months pregnant with my first son, and we were actually cleaning out for his bedroom.
Oh.
And I was going through the closet, putting some stuff away, and that is when I found a backpack that had a small computer in it that I had never seen before. And it was, I don't know, just immediately I knew.
Yeah.
Like, this is bad. And I pulled it out, and I opened it up, and I turned it on, and that's where everything just fell apart. And I had discovered my husband had been having an affair. To that point, I didn't know what extent, and he had an addiction to pornography. And so, big fight, very traumatic.
Yeah.
I was very angry, but that night he did not come clean and tell me everything. He had just, it's just somebody he'd met online. It didn't go beyond that. And, yes, he'd been looking at porn, and, but it was he'd go see somebody, we'd work through it. And, that was kind of that for that evening. And
he was playing it safe.
Exactly.
With telling you only what you needed to hear.
He says he was doing damage control.
Yes.
Still at that point.
Yes. Yes.
And the next day I remember just kind of going about my day, and I had a sense. I was like, there's more to it. There's just more that I don't know. I knew that he wasn't being completely honest with me. And the Lord reminded me this past week, after I talked with you about coming on, about the very dangerous prayer I prayed that day was, God, whatever it takes.
Wow.
To restore my marriage and my family. That's what I want. And
that's a bold prayer to pray, just even in the anger and the hurt that you were in right then. That says a lot about your walk with Christ at that time, because I don't know that most women would have prayed that prayer. They would have been, that's an easy out. It's a biblical out. So it would be easy to hang the towel up and just say, I'm done.
Yeah.
And be justified.
Yeah. And that's the next part of that. Because I prayed it, and I will say, like, to this day, that was, like, I didn't know what I had prayed. And so I just called my husband at work, and I said, look, I was like, I'm giving you one chance to, like, tell the whole truth, because I just feel like you're not being honest with me, but this is it. Like, tell the truth, or I'm done. I walk. And so he came home from work, and you know what he told me, honestly, I would have never in a million years guessed that he had met someone online, that he had flown out to meet her. They had an affair. He had met her in person. You know, it was on, and things started to make sense at that point to me. But up until that point, I thought, you know, never. My husband would never be the type of person who would do that. And so I was just, I was just dumbfounded.
Wow.
I did not expect for him to say that at all. And then I became very angry.
Sure.
Like, very angry, but I was angry with the Lord. Because I thought, well, now, here this is. And I had vowed pretty much my whole life that no man would mistreat me. I had watched my mother suffer through that, and that, I would just walk, and I'd be done, just wash my hands of this whole situation. So I would never be that woman. And here I was in this situation, and I was mad because I couldn't walk away. I was pregnant.
Right.
And the Lord knew exactly what he was doing when I got pregnant and when the affair was revealed, because I would be forced to pause and to consider what my life would look like had I walked out, which would have been what I had done, my opinion now, like, had I not been pregnant, there would just been no pause, no consideration of reconciliation or working through this. I would have just walked away and never looked back, and probably, spent the rest of my life being angry and bitter over it.
Sure.
So all that to say, I was angry with the Lord. Like, I'm stuck. Here you have me, like, all this is revealed and I'm stuck. That's how I felt. And, I don't remember how it all came to pass. We had said we would do counseling, the night before. And today he's like, let's talk to somebody. And I was just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And so he goes and he starts just calling numbers at random in the phone book. This is the crazy thing, like counseling to get with us. He had called our church.
Can you pause for a minute?
Sure.
The fact that you said phone book.
Yeah, right. Is that how old are we?
So sorry. Phone book. This generation has no idea what that is. You say phone book, they pick that phone up and they go through their contacts. We're like, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a big brick that held the door open. But anyway.
Yeah. Are you used in case of emergencies?
Or in case of an emergency, yes.
But anyway, like, he couldn't get in touch with anybody. And I really feel like this was totally a God thing. And he had called, honestly, at least half a dozen, if not more.
Now he's in desperation mode.
Exactly. Desperation. And it just, like, in an instant, someone from the church called back. The regular, just like, marriage pastor was out, and she was covering for him that day, and took our call. And he said, we kind of laugh about it to this day, because he retells the story of talking with her, and he thought, man, this is really bad, but I need to just tell the truth. Correct. So she'll know how bad this is. And so he, just kind of stumbled through everything quickly, and there's a pause on the other end, and she says, okay, can you be here tomorrow? And he said yes. And so that was where,
And you agreed to that?
I was just, honestly, at that point, I think I was just kind of didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. I was just angry and mad, and and I can remember walking around my backyard and saying, God, what am I going to do? And the Lord said, you're going to forgive him. I mean, it just like heard from the Lord, hadn't really heard from the Lord in a long time, but that was so clear. And I said, no, I'm not. And the Lord was like, yes, you are. I was like, no, I'm not. I mean, there was a literal back and forth because I was like, this is unforgivable. No, I can't, I can't do this, Lord. So I actually had made him, told him he couldn't stay. Like, you need to leave. Like, go, go stay with your parents. I don't want you here. I don't know what I'm going to do, but like, you can't be here. I don't want to look at you. And so he left. And the next day, actually, my mom came down that evening. She was living in Missouri at the time, came down to be with me. And it was, I was just honestly heartbroken, understandably.
Yeah.
And so the next day, I can remember I got up to go to work and, so still had a job. Life, still went on. And that was, the Lord gave me a perspective that has forever changed the way I see things on that day. I can remember it's like everything was happening around me in slow motion.
Yeah.
And everybody was going on about their lives and had no idea what was going on in mine. And I thought, like, this is the reality. Like in any moment, we never truly know what anyone's going through. And it was just, my heart was so heavy, and I was just hurting so badly. And it was like everything required more than I had to give.
Right.
And, and the Lord, I was doing home health during that time, honestly. And I had a sweet little couple that I had been seeing, and that was the day for the gentleman's discharge. And before I left, they just, the Lord used them to love on me and to encourage me and to provide for me. And they had no idea what was happening, but like, that is like one of the sweetest memories I have to this day, down to the point where I didn't have any gas in my truck. And I think like I didn't have any money in the bank that day. And they were like, here, I've got this Kroger gift card, like, go like you can use it for gas or groceries, please. It was,
wow.
So like I knew the Lord was providing. And so I left from there. And I remember it was time to go meet the counselor of the church. And on the way to the church, I got lost, like in my hometown, at the church that I go to every Sunday. And it was just like the state of my mind at that point.
Yes.
Like I forgot how to get to my church.
Wow.
And so my mom called and said, Gray's calling me, and he's is beside himself, thinking you're not coming. And I thought I was like, I'm going. It's like, but I forgot how to get there.
Wow.
And it was, Brandon. It's not a big city.
Not a big city.
But it was just like I took a wrong turn, and then I didn't know where I was, and then I didn't know how to get to where I was going. So my mind was just I was struggling. So but I got to the church, and we walked in together, and there's this big stairway that leads upstairs, and I can remember just telling myself, like, just put one foot in front of the other, because that was all I had to give. Like it took everything I had just to walk up the stairs. And I had decided that day that I went so that I could find out how to get past this myself. Not for my marriage, but like I wanted to move on, and I needed somebody how to tell me to move on, just for me, sure. Not really thinking I was going to stay in the marriage, honestly. And so we met with the counselor and, kind of talked through some things, and I was just kind of checked out. Like I said, I was just there for me and not for us. And, and she spoke something to me that was 100% the Lord right at the end, and it just grabbed my attention. And it was exactly what the Lord knew I needed to hear. And she told me, she said, now you're going to come back tomorrow, and you're going to see me, and here's what we're going to do. And I can remember I was just kind of nodding my head like, yeah, I'll be here. And so we left, and that's a big memory, because it was, I was resigned to this is just not going to work. This is too big. God can't redeem this. And so over the next, several days, I would go back, I would meet with her, and we would talk on the phone, and we were texting, and she just walked me through, it was a crash course in spiritual warfare.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And just recognizing, that seeing the enemy at work. And, and she pointed out that asked me how I felt about my pregnancy. I remember this. And I told her, just kind of shrugged my shoulders. And I was just like, honestly, I don't feel much. Like, I had kind of become detached about this child. And she said, do you realize in this moment you're placing a spirit of rejection on your child?
Wow.
And that was the first time I remember feeling like those mama bear instincts just kind of rise up.
Sure.
And it really woke me. And I was like, okay, like that no, and I won't do that. And just really learned that, that I do have an enemy. We have an enemy.
We do.
And it is not my husband. It was not my husband. And that, the person that I was at that time in my life, I needed a fight. Like I needed to seek revenge. I needed, it was like somebody needed to pay. And I recognized, though, like I can still do that, but it's just not against my husband. Like this is against, Satan.
Wow.
Who came after my family, who the Lord had called me to forgive my husband. He gave me, and I have it written down so I wouldn't get in here and get a little nervous and forget. And I hope it's Ephesians 4, I want to say 32, and where it was a call to obedience. And he says, get rid of all bitterness, anger, rage, malice, and deceit of any kind, forgiving one another as God through Christ forgave you.
And that's so hard.
And it is.
It's so hard.
It is hard. But the Lord told me that was what I was called to do. And by refusing to do that, I wasn't any better. My sin wasn't any better than my husband's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, and it was my eyes were open to, I think, like we as people, we put, like we grade our sins, like, from least to greatest.
Yes, of course we do.
And, and this was a big sin. And,
Right.
and, and like, little things that I did in my life, were little sins. And, the Lord just opened my eyes and was like, no. Like what you're doing by refusing to forgive, which is my call to obedience, is no better than what your husband has done. And so that was when I was like, okay, but Lord, I need you to help me do this. And that's where really just leaning into the supernatural element of surrender, because recognizing it was something that I could not do.
Right.
I had just, my heart was broken. And the part of me had no idea how to get past that. But I knew, like, this is what the Lord's telling me to do. And I set my mind on the fact of, like, okay, well, if I'm going to stay, if I'm going to really do this, then my marriage is going to be better than what it was before.
Yes.
Then this is going to be a testimony that I'm going to tell people about what God has done.
Yes.
And, this will not be for naught, and I just really leaned into that and waking up every day, like needing to be with the Lord, needing the Holy Spirit to minister to me, needing the Lord, and praying and saying, God, I can't love my husband today. I need you to love him through me.
Wow.
There's just days, honestly, like I just wanted to punch him in the face.
Sure.
The last thing I wanted to do was be kind and loving and forgiving. But
I want to punch mine in the face, and he hadn't had an affair, as far as I know.
Oh, well, there's still days. But those are, what the Holy Spirit spoke to me during those really hard times was, the days where I felt the least loving were the days that I would become the most loving.
Oh, wow.
And, the days that honestly I couldn't even look him in the face because it was too hard. Those were the days where I would lean in and, give him a hug.
Really?
Yeah. And it almost like in my mind, I had like this little image of like throat punching the devil. Like every time I did that, it was like a nice little jab.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, throat punching the devil. Okay.
The devil.
I was like, there's
Not
no way
my
you could throat
husband,
punch
no.
your husband because we haven't even mentioned that he's 6'5", and you're about 5 foot. Yeah. No, 5 foot even, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think you could reach his throat without a step stool, but okay. Yeah, we can throat punch the devil all day long. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of what, that was the way in my mind, just recognizing like that I do have an enemy, right, and there is a fight. But it was going to be all worthwhile. And like if the Lord called me, to do this, then he was going to empower me,
right,
to walk through it, to move through it. I was going to have a testimony to share on the other side of all this.
Yes.
And
he used it to reel you back into him.
Oh, certainly.
Because I've heard you say it in so many multiple ways already. Like, you didn't have the strength. You didn't want to. You couldn't find the energy to. But you still did. And it was because you were talking with Christ and leaning in on his strength and allowing the Holy Spirit to give you what you needed to make it through that moment or that day or that week. And I believe that the Lord used that to help reel you back in and put you where he needed you to use you.
Certainly. Certainly. Yeah.
So you went to counseling. How long did y'all go to counseling? And was it just at the church?
It was legit, like a crash course. Like, the two of us went there together, like maybe twice. And then my husband, he did go, our church at the time had like a ministry for men who were addicted to pornography.
Oh, wow.
And so there was this class, it was Kim and the leader of it and like one or two other guys, and they walked that. And then I continued to meet with the lady at church on my own, and just, and she just mentored me.
Yes.
Through all of this and encouraged me. And
yes.
God love her. She's a saint. Because, I know I was not easy. There were hard days. Yeah. And I'm so thankful.
Yes, of course.
For her, and that the Lord used her in such a mighty way.
And so what was the turning point for you when you knew that things, you've already kind of talked about the turning point of, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you when you felt like you were on the downslope? Like everything's going to be okay.
Honestly, I think it was maybe the second or third day that I had went to the church by myself. Yeah, that was the crazy thing. I know it was the third day because I remember thinking like in 3 days, like this is there's got to be something to this, and it was just going through, and it was just letting the Lord come in and heal all those places in my heart of unforgiveness, not just against my husband, but recognizing that lifelong I had carried so much that impacted the way that obviously there's a way you're going to react to this, but me in particular, having set my mind before I was ever even married, before I'd ever even met my husband, that I will never, tolerate this. This is what I will do. And it came from lifelong wounds that the Lord had not given him access to. And so it was like this, just walking through and allowing the Lord to heal those things. And then I was like, okay, let's do this. 3 days, that third day I called him. I was like, I want you to come home.
Oh.
And he came back home, and it was, like I said, it wasn't easy. But but the Lord did it. And there was no, I don't know, and we've since done marriage counseling, just for our marriage,
Sure.
not anything to do with the affair, honestly. And that's one of the things that always kind of tickled me was the counselors were like, so what kind of counseling or therapy did y'all have after the affair? And we were like, we didn't. We just like, it was just our church. And they're always looking for clarification on that, or looking to say like, so are you sure there's not things in your marriage now that, kind of harken back to this, the affair? Yep. We're like, no, we're good. Like, I'm like, we're good. And, and I can remember the counselor at the church telling me like, one day you're going to be able to look back and you're going to say that, this was a good thing. Like this is a good thing that happened in your marriage. And I thought, she is crazy.
Yes.
Who says that?
And why are you saying that to me now?
Yes, I'm pretty sure she's smoking something. So,
Right.
But honestly, like Stephanie, I'm there. Like it's the greatest thing that ever happened to our marriage, because the Lord didn't restore our marriage. He made it into something new and something beautiful, and did just such a great thing. And he used that to that gave us such assurance and beauty and like perseverance and growing our faith, so that those next trials that we would walk through, which we had miscarriage and infertility and just like some really financial, like the really hard times that would come, we were able to look back and be like, man, but look what God has done. Like, look what God has gotten us through. Like we can get through. The Lord is going to bring us through. He has been faithful in the past. He will continue to be faithful.
Yes.
And it's just, it's a beautiful testimony for sure.
It really is. And you were talking about, we really didn't go to counseling, but you didn't need to, because God is the great counselor.
Oh gosh, yeah. Look,
you were seeking the great counselor, and that is why. And that, I think that's really important to point out, that you already had a foundation, and God really just used this to grow your faith and to grow your strength in Him, which then brought you two back together. So I'm always curious about, the trust part. So, that's a pretty broken trust. Yeah. It's severed. It's cut in two. There's no thread hanging, nothing. It's done. Could maybe you talk a little bit about how y'all work to rebuild that trust?
Absolutely. That was that was a really difficult thing. Obviously, but especially in the beginning, there was a part of me, not, and this is not seeking counsel, wisdom from the Lord in this, but that thought like, well, I have to do all of these things in order to make sure, He's doing right.
Correct.
Like, I need to be checking the phone.
Control.
I need to be looking at the cell phone bill. I need to call numbers I don't know. I need to, it was like all these things. But here's the thing, like, it was exhausting. Like, I just was constantly in a state of angst and worked up and looking and checking, and am I doing this and am I missing that? And I'll never forget, I was out in the backyard, one day, just like sat in the backyard a lot. And I was like, Lord, like, I can't do this. And He spoke so clearly, and He said, you don't need to trust Gray, but you do need to trust me.
Man, that's powerful.
And I was like, it was such a release. And I was like, okay, like, okay, Lord, like I will trust you with this. But it was certainly, and on mine and Gray's part, and I will say on his part, as obviously, as awful as what he, that pain that he had caused, just like during this whole time, like if there was nothing he wouldn't do if I needed it done.
Right.
Like, no question, He wouldn't answer. He was, on the days where I know that I was not patient, I was not loving, and I was not kind, I was not, 1 Corinthians at all. And He was always just gentle and loving and steady and kind. And like the Lord just used Him to love on me, in that physical, manifest presence of God's love.
That?
Yeah. So it was, he was just so sweet and so kind, and and he was there, in every way I needed him to be.
Good.
But yeah, but there was a long time where, where it was just like, okay, Lord, I'm trusting you.
Yeah.
Like I feel icky and this feels uncomfortable and this brings more so like bringing back all these memories of things. And, but and too, my husband was like, it was an open book. We pick up to this day, we pick up each other's phone at any given time. Yeah. Like we don't, it's just, there's safeguards that you learn to put in place, in your own life, in your own heart. And through that, again, just, I can't say enough about our church as a resource and it was just wise counsel we've had through Sunday school and life groups and, about protecting your marriage and, honoring your spouse. And so, yeah, the trust that was, if he went out of town, he would call me when he got there. And he would say, here's the number to my hotel room.
That was
girl, I was a hot mess. You kidding? And he was like, video in his room, and he's like, I'm here. It's just me. Call me if you need to. I'm going to go out to eat. Is that okay? Yes. I can stay if I need to. It was, and I think, so it was definitely, it was hard work on both of our parts.
Yeah, but he was willing to do what he needed to do. He didn't stay defensive and in a defense mode of holding on to that, so that he was willing to give you what you needed in order to trust him again.
And I think, and that was key.
His pride.
In the very beginning, and I know this may sound crazy, but in the very beginning, one of the things the counselors had said was like, you need to get rid of your phone. Like if you've got a pornography addiction, like you don't need access to the internet on your phone. You need to get rid of your phone. And as bad as things were, I would have never had the nerve to ask my husband to do that. He is like Mr. Techie. Like he was the first to have the first iPhone and all, like he's got all the things and the gadgets and like that. Just, and even I just would not have. And he said, okay, like, I mean, just like that. And he went and got like the little flip phone that had, like he would, and I know it sounds crazy, but I was just like, if he's willing to actually, it's like whatever it takes.
You knew then.
I did. I knew then. I was surprised, but I knew then, and he continued. And that's part of building that trust.
It is.
He just continued to do whatever it took to make sure that I always felt secure and safe.
Wow.
In whatever the situation may be.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Now, you've mentioned several times that this being a testimony that God would use in the future and that you'd be able to tell others about. I just wonder, I have two questions about this. The first one being, have y'all shared any of this with your children at any point?
Mm-hmm. That's we actually, so excuse me, my oldest son, I guess it's been in the last couple years. There were some things came about. We had, talks with him about a young man, guarding his heart and his mind, especially, against pornographic things. And it led into some conversations where the Holy Spirit just guided it and was like, tell him.
That's right.
And I had always, honestly, I was fearful of telling him because I was afraid of how he would look at his daddy. Knowing his daddy had done that, like worried that he would think like, see it as my daddy did this to my mama. And the crazy thing to me was, he was like, oh man, poor daddy. That must have been so hard. And I was just blown away. And the part of me was like, what? But then,
poor daddy.
Like, what are you?
Wait a minute.
But it was like, okay, Lord, I see you. Like, and that's how I knew, it was just, and man, and yeah, and I will say, and that's a beautiful part of also what God did during this time with me being pregnant, when he was born. Oh my God. That first baby.
Yes. There's something about the first one.
Oh, Stephanie, I was like, this is what I was meant to do in life. I was just so full of love and overwhelmed by what it felt like to be a mama. And it was just like, and on those, because this was, like I said, I was 5 months pregnant.
Yeah.
And so like this throughout, my memories of being pregnant are not as, they're overshadowed by what we were walking during that time. Yeah. But after he was born, the difficulty of what we were walking was it was just cast into the shadow because of the light that he brought into our lives.
Yes.
And, gosh, yeah, it was wonderful.
That's good. I like to share when I have the opportunity with people that are dealing with issues with their children or going through tough times, and I'll ask them, are you being transparent with them? Are you being completely honest with them? When my kids began to ask questions about their dad and I, we're divorced, I from the beginning I was just very honest with them. I was honest about my mistakes. I was honest about what I had done. And made sure that they knew their dad was a good father. He was, and he was a good husband. And I wanted them to know the truth. And I wanted them to know the raw, transparent truth. And what I've seen God do with that over the years, especially in their teenage years, was they were more open and apt to come to me when they had a situation or when they had something that they were going through that they wanted to talk through. Instead of going to someone else, they would call me. And I'm thankful for that, because there was a time where I was fearful that I had ruined my relationship with my children while I was in my sin. But God has restored those relationships by allowing me to be transparent with them and to be open and honest. And I believe that it's important for our kids to see that we do make mistakes and how we overcome those with Christ's help and how we work through those versus never talking about them. And the children just think, oh, well, mom and dad must never make mistakes, or mom and dad are perfect, or I can't go and talk to them because they've never done anything like this. And so I'm thankful that y'all have taken the opportunity to talk with your oldest especially, and using it as an opportunity to teach him in his teenage years, because that is powerful. And I am certain that it strengthened y'all's relationship with him in that moment.
Oh, sure.
In that moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so the second part of that question, has God brought people into your lives that have had similar situations that you were able to help?
Oh, gosh, yeah. And that was almost immediate.
Really?
Like it was kind of, within our church, and our friend group, anytime there was somebody, they were like, oh, we all need to talk to Greg and Courtney. Okay. Like, okay, yeah. Oh, if you think you're struggling, like, you need to talk to Greg and Courtney and let them tell you what the Lord has done in their marriage. And so there were several people, and then there were even husbands reaching out, wives reaching out, like saying, my husband's addicted to pornography. Like, I don't know what to do here. And it was just, it was kind of like floodgates opened, and so many people. And that's what I realized is the biggest thing in the middle of this. We just want hope. It was like hope, like if you have made it, if the Lord has brought you through it, then he can do the same for me. Like it's not lost. And there's I feel like that's the most powerful part of any testimony, is that the hope that it gives to others.
Yes.
And so, and we actually, when I was pregnant with my third son, pretty sure, we got up in front of the church. We were doing a series on miracles, and we got up. We were asked, as far as miracles in the marriage, to get up and share a testimony before the church. And so that was really awesome to be able to stand up in front of everybody and share that, for sure.
How does Gray feel about sharing? And maybe speak to, like, the first time y'all were asked to be open about it. How did Gray react?
It's funny. I was thinking about that this morning. I feel like the Lord brought that back. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. The first time we did share, because I was gung ho. Like, I wanted everybody to know.
I didn't do anything wrong. Like, so no. I'll share all day.
And I didn't even think about it that way, honestly. But I was like, people need to know and look what the Lord has done. And I was just on fire. And I don't remember his reaction to all that, but I do remember the first time we shared, it was with our life group leaders, and we both felt like the Lord had laid it on our heart to go to them and share what we had walked through.
Okay.
And I was like, this is going to be great, and I was so fired up, and we got in there and got to sharing, and I got mad. Like Stephanie, I just got mad all over again.
Oh, no.
Yes. But it was the first time. Yeah. And I think, and that's why the Lord, he'd kind of held us held back when I wanted to like rush in. It was like, you're not ready. You're not ready. You know, it was still, those wounds when poked were still painful.
Sure. Sure.
More painful than they should be. And so I can remember walking out and telling Gray, like, oh, that didn't go at all like I thought. Like, I just, and Gray says, well, that wasn't for you, it was for me.
Oh, wow.
I was like, okay. And, you know, and he said it was, I think, you know, there's a lot of pride there in admitting, you know, like how bad I messed up. And I needed to confess that. And I was like, wow, okay. But so like anymore, I like, you know, when I told him I was, you know, coming to share, I was like, there anything, you know, you don't want me to say? And he was like, I mean, I think pretty much we're an open book at this point. I was, so like full reign. He speaks with such grace and eloquence, you know, in telling his side of, you know, because this was something that he'd struggled with long before our marriage, and you know, it had kept him in bondage for years and years. And man, and the Lord, you know, when the Lord came in and just cleaned house, he cleaned house, and you know, we just really fortified that part of his heart and his mind, you know, with the Lord's protection.
Sure,
and it's a good thing.
So I wonder, did he ever figure where the root of that came from?
Yeah. And that's, you know, it was just like that first time having been introduced to it.
Okay.
And it was just, you know, immediately it just kind of took hold.
Just just that sinful nature. We've all been in a situation like that before. I just wondered if it came from, you know, from a trauma or a broken heart that he had.
I think, you know, and I don't want to speak for him, but one of the things that I know we've discussed over the years is just there was always, you know, he always struggled with just a confidence.
Yeah.
You know,
there it is.
like insecurity.
Yep.
And
needing that validated. And so I know that when we talked, when I called you and was like, hey, I want you to pray about, you know, sharing, you mentioned that God had started really bringing some things up that really didn't have anything to do with that, but that attributed to that. And I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, but I wanted to.
I can to the best of my ability. I'm not yet.
You're still working
through and
but maybe not so much the details of it, but like however you explained it to me that day, it just made sense to me. So maybe just talk about what season God has got you in right now, I guess.
Yeah. So I'll just say again what I had shared with you, like just the last 2 years in our marriage have been hard like never before. You know, like I almost feel like and I don't want to say we were coasting because we worked really hard, but honestly, that was 2010 that all happened, and so honestly, up until about 2023, we coasted, like everything was great, at least so I thought, and then. We started having more arguments and we're disconnected, and I felt like Gray had just like mentally checked out. And
did that scare you?
Oh gosh, yeah. And I think I couldn't even, and that plays into what we're walking through right now. What I realize I've always struggled to do is to put a name exactly on how I feel. And almost to the point of, what I realize is I've just been afraid of my emotions, those big emotions, because I didn't want them to take over. And it was a fear of like I didn't have enough faith. I wasn't being a good enough Christian if I allowed myself to really visit how I was feeling, and there was a struggle there. And so I had a tendency for a long time to just kind of skim over it. And what the Lord just kind of, and especially as a nurse, what the Lord just came to mind is wounds. That so if you have a wound and it heals too quickly, it's not really healed. And the way to go in and achieve full healing is that you have to debride that top layer. You have to take it all off, and it is very painful. Just like with Lord, it's a very painful work. And but in order for the healthy skin, the healing to take place, you got to take all the yuck off.
Wow.
So that it heals from the inside out.
Wow.
Because if it heals too quickly, you just have that layer on the outside and it looks good and it looks healthy, but within there's really some yucky stuff that's going on. And so I think that's what these 2 years, but a little sliver of what the Lord has shown me. There's so much underneath the surface that I have, just me personally, have shoved down and not dealt with. And it, harkens back to just some things from childhood. So, Gray withdrew. Then I didn't feel safe. And that coming from the childhood that I did, I have a deep need to feel safe. And that, is very important. And so, and this was not, the husband that I know, the person that he was. And and it was so confusing and so difficult. And so I'll fast forward to now. That's when we started, just kind of seeing a counselor to work through some of this. And and that's what Grace said. I was like, look, it reminded me of what we went through when you had the affair. Like you just checked out and you just weren't there. And so then I began to think like, well, what's happening? And he said, it wasn't anything like that. And and that's when he said those areas of my life, I feel like the Lord has fortified so that they're, never say untouchable, but like that the enemy couldn't get in. And so then he went looking for another route. And he chose, to really play on my insecurities.
Yes.
And so instead of it becoming about, we are each other's biggest fan and we're on the same team, then, he began to listen to the lies of the enemy that said, that I wasn't true in my intentions, and that, the things that I was doing were just, trying to manipulate, and, anything but the truth. Sure. And I was still a stay-at-home mom, and I'm drowning in, 3 kids and a house and doing
3
all the
young
things.
kids.
And I went back to work after 6 years, and it was like all this stuff. And we just, like, we weren't on the same page. And so the Lord has brought to light some really good stuff. And I'll answer any direct questions you have, but I can't really speak eloquently on it just yet. I'm still.
No, that was the healing is what I wanted you to share, because I believe that is very, very powerful. And I believe that that's going to speak to some people that maybe are looking at that scab on the outside going, oh yeah, everything's good. We're good. Everything's good. But they know deep down there's something else that needs to be taken care of, and they're ignoring that because they don't want to suffer. But in the suffering is where God does the work.
That's where he shows up.
That's right. When the pressure is applied, that's when he's able to make something beautiful out of it. And so, well, Cortni, I appreciate you being here. Is there any last minute comments or advice or anything that you would give that you haven't shared with us? I always like to give that opportunity. If there's anything else you want to say, maybe even specifically to women who maybe they're walking through that right now.
I would just say that in any whether it be an affair or addiction or depression or anxiety or physical illness, you are never without hope. Man, I think I think the light of the Lord shines brightest in our darkest hour, and we forget a lot of times that to let Him in. We can become overcome by the darkness, and but that's not the end, man. Like there is hope, and there is healing, and there is redemption, and there is, the Lord just has so much to say about who we really are.
Yeah.
We just got to be really ready, willing to listen.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you for sharing your heart with us today, and how God took your broken heart and was able to restore it, not only yours, but your husband's as well. Because let's face it, in an affair, regardless of who is the offender, there's two broken hearts. There's two broken hearts. And the fact that you guys surrendered and allowed the great healer to pick it all back up and put it back together is a beautiful, beautiful testimony. And I'm really, really thankful that that you were able to share it with us. I'm thankful that Gray is so willing for you to share y'all's story together. I don't know what God has in store for the podcast right now. It's women who have been broken. We're all broken at some point, but that are willing to then share their brokenness and how God has restored it. But who knows? Maybe we'll have a session where we have couples on and we talk about
Chasten in here.
Get Chasten in here, yeah, and we can talk about that. We're not going to throat punch them, but we'll.
You like that, did you?
I love that. But we, who knows what God has in store. But I am thankful for you. I'm thankful for Gray. Be sure to tell him how thankful I am that he was willing to allow you to come and to share, because I know that there are so many other women that either have been through and never dealt with it and or are walking through it right now and just feel like you did with, I'm just putting one foot in front of the other. That's all I can give right now. And I hope that this sheds some hope and some light through what Jesus Christ did for you guys to them. So thank you.
Thank you.